Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Journeyman Music Show. As always, I'm Paul, and this is Chad.
Hello.
And yeah, today we talk about a very important topic, especially for musicians. We talk about how to make and find time for your hobbies and personal projects. So we're probably going to use a lot of anecdotes from our personal experience, most likely related to music, but most of the tips we're going to share are actually applicable no matter what kind of project you're looking to. So you could be trying to sell pants online, you could be trying to be a potter, you could be trying to sell paintings. The struggle for time is going to be the same. And hopefully we'll try to help you with that and find time throughout the week, optimize your time, and use it better. Okay, let's start with what inspired today's episode. What is your backstory, Chad?
So finding time for things is always I think it's always a struggle for most people, right? For me, hopefully some of you guys out there can relate to this. For me, it's less about like not having enough hours in the day, but more about prioritizing those hours to do something that I would like to have done, you know? I tend to spend a lot of hours on YouTube and on Netflix and things like that, which, valuable. I enjoy those times, but I could be doing more productive things. And that's important if I would like to have accomplished productive things, like, for instance, making music. Um, so that's always been a struggle for me. Even when there were times when I was trying to be a writer, there were times when I was trying to do some logo design and freelance work and stuff like that. And I never could just seem to devote the time to get it together. Even if there were enough hours in the day, I wasn't able or willing to put the hours in. So hopefully some of the stuff we're going to talk about today can help with that sort of issue too. In addition to just being a generally busy person, also being a bad time prioritizing person.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think this podcast is not just about how to make more time, but it's also about how to get more things done, which is a little bit wider of a topic. So yeah, just to give some more context about my current struggles. So in my adult life, I've always been very busy. So first it was, studies with college and everything, and now it's mostly for work. So I work as a consultant, which means I tend to have more hours than most people. I have a lot of work to do. And because I'm working for clients, I need to adapt to their schedule. And often my schedule is just, not the priority. So I need to adapt. And it's always been a big struggle for me that I'm not completely the master of my own schedule, right? I'm not the master of my agenda. And this is kind of hard for me because I really need to have some creative activities. Otherwise, I feel really bad. Like I'm not someone who always needs to do creative stuff. And because my job is not art related, it's not music related, I have this craving for art whenever I don't find the time for actually doing something productive. Yeah, so that's my motivation. Like most of my tips will come from someone who works. I don't have kids yet, but I do have two cats. That takes a lot of time. And I do commute a lot. Like going to work takes me an hour roughly. So when I go to work, I lose 2 hours a day essentially. So I do have a lot of time constraints.
Yeah, and for me, I stay home and I do have a couple of kids. And while they're a little bit older, so it's not like I'm taking care of a newborn and like constantly up and down or anything like that, it is still difficult if you're a person who, like me, struggles to kind of get into the groove and get started with something and then change and then come back to it, that sort of thing. It can definitely be tricky. So optimizing the time that you do have and some tips on hopefully how to like transition from one task to another. Hopefully that sort of thing is going to be helpful as well. Because if I'm really, feeling good, I've been working on a song for 40 minutes and then the kids come down and start going nuts and I can't hear anything and I need to help them and stuff like that. That's a separate issue that I need to deal with. And, a demanding wife, right? No, I'm just kidding. But she, obviously needs help with the kids and stuff like that. Um, so so yeah, if you're someone like me who is in that difficult situation where you find yourself having some time but having to go back and forth and never reliable time, which I think is something you were talking about as well, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we can be useful in that regard. So, all that being said, I think it's time to jump into the main thrust of this podcast, which will be hopefully getting right into the tips. And Paul has some very helpful, like step-by-step instructions here that can help get you on your way.
Yeah, so I think, as in a lot of things, the first step is to think about your current situation, thinking about what you want to do, like what you want to use that time for, of course, but how you're spending your time currently, right? Analyze your life, try to be more active when you're doing things, and like actively thinking about how you're spending time. Like we all have 24 hours a day. How do you spend your 24 hours? What kind of activities can you potentially cut out? Which ones bring you value? Which ones bring you joy? And try to just have a first idea and understanding of how you're spending your time throughout the week, throughout the day. And yeah, I think this is a very insightful thing to do.
Yeah, this is particularly helpful for like particularly transferable to other activities as well. If you're trying to make time for anything, and sometimes even just for your mental health, like something that people will recommend who, are trying to give you some tips on how to better spend your time. If you actually really pay attention and you can even write down how many hours a day you're spending doing certain things. I mean, I know numbers have been published fairly recently and I think are pretty regularly how many hours people are spending on social media, how many hours are you scrolling through Instagram, doom scrolling Twitter, that sort of thing, and it is shocking the number of hours. I mean, I have friends who have gotten into like mobile games and told me that they tracked the number of hours they were spending and they didn't know how they were like functional at work because they were spending so many hours like doing these games. So that's a really, really good first step to determine how much time you're spending on things. Just really, really pay attention. And then hopefully it'll make it easy to cut some things out and prioritize. But even if not, you're still going to be able to find, okay, here are the things that are really important for me to prioritize. Here are the things I can probably cut back on. And you can make a schedule for yourself if you're that kind of person. I'm not. But if you are, that would be great.
And if you're like me and you're spending a lot of time on your phone, most modern phones have actually, they track this data. They track how much time you're spending on each app, or they give you a good idea of how you're spending your time on your screens. Like, and there are also apps for your desk, your computer or other devices. But yeah, for me, I think like what I spend a lot of time on is scrolling through Reddit, watching series, especially the ones that I've seen 10 times already. And I could definitely cut out those activities. Like I still want to be doing them because I'm doing them because I enjoy them. And the idea here is not to cut out everything you like in life and just be productive 100% of the time. The idea is to find the sweet spot between, taking time for yourself, relaxing, but also staying productive and saving time for yourself. So what about you? What do you think you can cut out from your current schedule?
Oh man. So I always go through phases and cycles, man, right? Where I'm really going to prioritize, getting in better shape, for this however long. Although I never set goals that clearly, but I'm like, from now on, I'm getting in shape. Or from now on, I'm going to make some music, or from now on, I'm going to work on a novel, and, obviously those things don't always pan out. So yeah, the things that I can cut out are not too far off from Paul. I used to spend a lot of time on Reddit. Don't do that so much anymore, but definitely watching some shows, watching movies, playing video game. I don't think you mentioned video games, but video games are great. Don't get me wrong. I love video games. I hopefully will make some video game music at some point, that sort of thing. But do I really need to be doing that many hours on like Civilization 6? You know what I mean? Like, I don't. I'm not going to finish that game anyway. So it's really, there have always been things that I could cut out for sure. And usually they are the things that you don't tend to notice, that you plan to spend an hour on and then you sink 4 hours into it before you know what's happening, So auditing is very helpful for that sort of thing and has helped me to be more productive recently and, do things like a podcast, for instance. So we've talked about why it's important to audit your time if you're trying to be more productive. And so now that we've audited our time, now that we see what we're spending, what we're wasting, what we could maybe change around a little bit, then once we have that, it's time to start reprioritizing, figure out what it is you want to do and how you want to do it.
Yeah, and I think the way you are going to try to make time really depends on what you want to achieve, right? If you want to develop a new skill, for example, if you want to learn how to play guitar, or if you want to learn how to use Ableton or whatever DAW you are getting into, then I think it's better to actually find even 5 to 10 minutes every day so that you can practice this new skill, on a regular basis and transform it into a habit to actually learn and remember things. Develop your muscle memory, do some scales. This is going to be so much more effective than just finding a whole day and then not having time for 2 months and then picking up your guitar like 2 months later. This is not going to be very effective. Where it's going to be effective though is if you want to make time for a big project, right? this is where you're going to need to find large chunks of time, like a full day, 2 days, maybe even more. Then it's a different kind of time saving for a different kind of goal. So defining exactly what you want to do is going to impact how you want to save time, and hopefully we can give you tips on how to find a little bit of time here and there, how to find large chunks of time, and also how to optimize how you're using time already.
And I think we've been finding for ourselves that we have been trying to work on developing some skills. Definitely. That's the main one for me. But also, it has been helpful to try and devote chunks of time to things. I just released my first single on Spotify. I'm a real music boy now. But to do that, I did have to spend some chunks of time on, getting it ready and getting it out and stuff like that. In addition to just continuing to learn the skills, which when you inevitably stream my song, even though you'll find it awesome, you'll still definitely see that there's work to do. There's stuff I got to learn, So yeah, it'll be important to find both of those types of time for us personally, but generally, yeah, I mean, see where you want to start. Do you want to start with a big project? Do you want to start with a skill? And it's important to prioritize in the correct way.
Yeah, and no matter which of these relations you relate to the most, I think one very important point is that making time is an active decision, right? Making time should be a priority because it's so easy to let time slip through your fingers. It needs to be an active thing that you're doing, like consciously, right? And you're never going to find extra time. As we said, we all have 24 hours a day. So whenever you want to introduce something new in your life, then you need to make time and cut something out. So it's always going to be an effort because you're always going to have to sacrifice something. It's all about the opportunity cost. You're going to have to delete something out of your life, cut it out, and replace it with something that you think is more valuable or more pleasant or more interesting.
Yeah, or at least cut it back, even if you're not necessarily cutting it out. Little point of advice. I know some people listening and or watching will immediately be thinking, oh, I have so many things that I like to do. They're all so important. Maybe I'll just cut out sleep. Don't do that. Don't cut out sleep. You're not going to be as productive if you don't sleep. So please be healthy about it. Make good decisions.
That's so true. We've all done it. Yeah, one more disclaimer before we move on to the next tip. We're going to give you tips that have been effective for us, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be effective for you. Like, we all have different situations. So we're going to give you what worked for us in our situation. And hopefully out of all the tips we're going to share, some of them are going to work for you.
And to add on that, it's not like we're maximally productive, like super geniuses who are running, billion-dollar companies or anything like that. Just things that we've found more helpful to be more productive, to be closer to the place that we want.
So let's deep dive into the first situation, trying to find a little bit of time every day, which is especially efficient if you want to develop a new skill. So I think one of the best tips I've found, if, for example, let's take the example of learning how to play guitar, right? Is making it as easy as possible to practice, because that way you're going to have a much bigger chance to actually get it done. Like, for example, imagine I set myself a goal. I'm going to do scales 10 minutes per day. It's a proven method. People have been doing it for hundreds of years. Everybody on YouTube tells you to practice 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. But you can make it so much easier if you just, put your guitar just right in your bedroom, so that every time you go to your bedroom, you see your guitar and you pick it up, and it's so easy to do it. So making it easy, like in terms of effort, making it seem effortless is actually going to help you make the time. Instead of wasting a couple of minutes here and there, you can actually practice your scales 3-4 times, and that's going to add up over time, and that's actually going to help you a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've got all of my stuff here. In the background, you see all my kids' stuff and everything. But I spend a lot of time sitting right here watching things. This is where I play games. This is where, I do the things that I enjoy generally. So, yeah, having all this stuff sitting right here, I'm like, well, I mean, got my MIDI controller right here. I might as well press out a few keys, see what I can do. You know what I mean? And so it's really helpful. And then sometimes I get really lost into it, and I'm very productive, and sometimes it's annoying because I can't finish what I want to finish. But yeah, generally it's great. I have my keyboard there, my guitar back in the background, and it's so easy to just pick them up and play,
And I think it's also, getting things done is not just about time, it's also about energy and motivation. And Often when I used to go to work every day, like before actually being able to work remotely, I used to be super tired. Like at the end of the day, and didn't have any. I was never in the mood to play, and what I found out was that I had a much better chance of getting that practice done if I were to do it early in the day, start my day with it when I still have energy, and then I would just still go to work and have my normal day, and it wouldn't change anything. Those 10 minutes of guitar didn't really affect my working day, but my working day was affecting those 10 minutes of guitar. So putting the nice short practice that you want to get doing early in the day is probably, it was pretty efficient for me.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. I've never been a morning person. Like I usually don't feel awake until 12 or 1 o'clock, even if I'm up at 7 with the kids. Um, but yeah, finding the time of day that works best for you is definitely a good thing. Making sure you have it handy when you're most likely to do it. And I know for me, probably my general rule that I've noticed about myself is if I have to stand up to do a thing, I'm probably about 80% less likely to do it you know? So I think it's probably a good idea wherever you're going to be at that optimal time of day, put things within arm's reach, you know?
Yeah, that's true. There's often a lot of way to incorporate things in your life, right? Without even having to dedicate your time completely or your focus completely to that thing. For example, let's say you take the bus every day, right? Or you take the train, maybe you're driving. You can actually just, without changing the way you spend time, because you're still going to have to drive, you're still going to have to take the bus and go to work, you can change how you use that time to add some more productive tasks in the meantime, right? For example, you're taking the subway. You can listen to a podcast. Podcasts are great. You can watch videos. Well, not if you're driving, of course, but if you're in the subway or the bus, you can watch videos about music theory. You can learn about workflows from cool producers on YouTube. There's always a way to be a little bit more productive, even though you have obligations to do some things.
Yeah, and something that I find probably most rewarding is to make sure, and we mentioned it in I think the last episode with Rahul, is to make sure you have a way of recording ideas on your phone or carry a little notepad or whatever, so that if I'm stuck doing something that I'm just not interested in, like a commute or something like that, I can still at least be getting down ideas, something that doesn't require me to watch or listen or anything like that, but I can still be creating.
That's true. And maybe like imagine you can't be productive, but you can at least try to get some of the boring stuff out of the way. For example, take care of like administrative stuff and everything, send emails, and then when you're home, you don't have to do those things anymore. So you can actually spend that time that you saved, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, on cool stuff.
Exactly. But the key is to make sure that you then give yourself the permission to actually enjoy the extra time that you've given yourself, not just add more hours onto your workday.
I hope I haven't offended anyone who thinks doing papers is fun.
I think that minority will be okay. So another kind of addendum to that tip, but this could actually apply to making small amounts of time or to making larger amounts of time. Either way, something that could be important for you to do is to get yourself an accountability buddy. Is that from SpongeBob? What is that? I don't remember what
I'm
exactly that's
I
from.
have not watched SpongeBob in English.
Oh, well, all right. They didn't say l'accountability buddy. That was spot on French pronunciation. Um, but somebody who's going to know about what it is you're trying to do and help you make sure that you're doing it, right? I know when I used to run a lot, and this was, oh, so long ago, probably 12 years ago or something. My wife and I would run together all the time. And when one of us didn't feel like running, the other one would make them go do it. And it was great. We loved it. Stopped it, obviously, but loved it for a while. Um, so having somebody there who is able to understand what it is that you're doing and recognize that it's important to you will help you, even if they're not really saying anything to you, you will still be like, oh, they know I'm supposed to do this, so I probably shouldn't really cheat on it. You know what I mean? So that's a really good way to help to motivate yourself. That's why some people do better in like fitness classes and stuff than working out by themselves at home, that sort of thing. If you're accountable to other people, you're much, much more likely to follow through on whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
All right. So what about if you want to find a lot of time for bigger projects now, right? I remember you once mentioned, planning ahead. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So, especially, yeah, if you need a big chunk of time to do something, it's probably going to, if not inconvenience people around you, it's probably at least going to inconvenience you, right? You're going to have to change up your routine significantly if you want to spend, 3 or 4 days, like a few hours a day, or even a more significant chunk on something. It's really going to take some time. So, planning ahead is going to be something that is crucial for most people. Most of us don't live the type of life where we can just be like, 3 days, yeah, why not? I'll spend that all making music. um, so you want to make sure that you have a time. You want to make sure that you know when you're going to do what you're going to do, how long you're going to do it, and this doesn't have to be down to the hour or anything, but just like, okay, the weekend of the 25th, I'm really going to get down to it. And then you can make sure that you set that time aside so you don't plan other stuff. Also, you can make sure that you do the cursory work that needs to be done beforehand to make that happen, right? So if that means getting in that project on Friday so that you can really focus, that work project on Friday so that you can really focus on your fun project on Saturday and Sunday, make sure that you do that initial work so that you're ready to go.
Yeah, this is so important. And now you have so many tools, to just, I use Google Agenda a lot, like Google Calendar. I tend to block time whenever there's a big task I want to do. I just, for example, book a weekend and spend that weekend on it. But at least I write it down so that first of all, I don't forget about it because that would be, that would be a bummer. And then like I decline everything that, like any invite that would happen on that weekend, right? Unless someone gets married, um, but like it's kind of important to respect that, um, those ambitions. If you really care about getting things done, then you need to value the time you need to dedicate to that, and you need to turn down some other things. And that's sometimes it's kind of sad, but like once you've done it, then you're super happy to actually have made the time, and it just makes it feel even better when you get things done.
Yeah, making something a priority and spending your time on it really does sometimes take a commitment. It's not something that you can just automatically do very easily, and that's just going to come very naturally. Because if you're that type of person living that kind of life, you don't really need our advice, right? You already know how to be productive. But if you are not that type of person, if you are the other 99.65% of us, then yeah, it's really important if you're going to prioritize to make sure that you're really, really doing it formally, and you're going to have to sacrifice some stuff sometimes.
And turning down like invites from your friends or other people actually has another effect, right? I think it's a good transition to the next step. It's about developing habits, right? If you keep turning down your friends, for example, sometimes I say, "Oh, sorry, I can't go out on Tuesday night. I need to record an episode for my podcast." So then my friends are like, "Oh, you have a podcast," and then like I keep turning down like invites like every month when we're recording an episode, and the consequence of that is that my friends know that I have a podcast now, and they start to respect that I'm spending my time on those activities because they are important for me, right? And I'm actually building a habit to consistently make time for for the podcast, for recording, for editing, for publishing, for promoting, and the people around me know that. And now that they know about it, it's much easier for me to actually just say, "Oh no, sir, I'm doing the podcast on Tuesday."
Yeah, sometimes if you start to shape your life around something that becomes a priority for you, your life will also start to shape itself around that priority. And that's really what one thing that contributes to it becoming a habit. Yeah, exactly like you said, the people around you understanding what it is that you're doing and when you're doing it, it makes it easier in the future so that people aren't bothering you like, come out, come on, it's Saturday, come out. And you're like, I can't come out Saturday. And then eventually they stop asking, which, maybe seems like kind of a sad thing. But you can always like tell them, hey, I'm free this Saturday, so let's go party. But yeah, once those things start to become established and become a real part of your routine, then it's a habit whether you want it to be or not. Even if you don't feel like it, you're gonna have nothing else to do that Saturday night. So you better go ahead and be productive.
Yeah, please don't record podcasts on Saturday nights. Go out.
Okay. All right, Mr. Popular.
Nah.
That's.
And actually, I think the best example of this is, our weekly calls.
Yeah, those weekly calls were really, really cool and absolutely crucial to me. And I can't remember if we've mentioned them on the podcast before, maybe in the first episode. Um, But what we were doing was, so we took this class together where we were learning music production. I know we've talked about that. But this small little community developed out of that, where a number of us were having a weekly like Discord call, a weekly group chat. And we had enough people to where everybody was submitting a new project of some kind every 3 weeks, right? So everyone knew they had that deadline coming up. Myself, Paul, Rahul, who you heard last week, a bunch of other people. I had a calendar that I was maintaining, and I was like, all right. And I would remind people, you're up this week. Make sure you got something, and then we would submit and we would get feedback and stuff like that. But whatever it is that you're doing, we had a whole group and we developed a real routine around it. And now, even though we haven't really done those calls for a little while, we still have maintained, at least some of us, I know Paul and I have still maintained a lot of those habits where we're being regularly productive and we're submitting things to the group sometimes, for feedback and stuff like that. So even if it's not formalized, we've still carried those lessons with us. And it's been one of the primary things that has kept me productive.
Yeah, I think those weekly calls were really amazing. And I mean, big shout out to all the great people we met there, by the way. But like, if you're trying to to get something done, it's usually really useful to find other people who have similar goals and actually talk about it on a regular basis. And you're just gonna feel like you have to have something to update the other, and you're gonna feel like you need to be productive. And this is gonna put a little bit of pressure, but like some positive pressure on your shoulders, and this is going to help you get things done. And I mean, it was amazing for us because, well, we were accountable to other people. Everybody was coming up with amazing stuff, so we needed to level it up to be on par with the level of other people, and that would put like a good pressure on ourselves. And also, like, the other effect of that was that, for example, for your partner, your roommates, whoever, they all knew that we wouldn't be available like every Friday night because we had those calls and they knew about it. So like, it was like, just like we said before, it's much easier to make time when it's actually a regular habit and people know about it.
Yeah, so that really was a great combination of the accountability part and the routine making part. And honestly, if you are able to, if you know other people who are working on music and stuff like that, music specifically, it would apply to a lot of things, but I know that it works for music. If you can get a group going and just regularly submit things, not too often, like don't burn yourself out on it. But that's
Yeah.
why I thought 3 weeks was a good amount of time for us. Yeah, if you can do that, please do. It has been an absolute lifesaver, not literally life, but like music life,
Game changer? I don't know.
Yeah, that's better. That's a better way to say it. Doesn't make us think about our mortality as much.
Yeah, see, back to philosophy. Yeah, and I think like the class itself is also a good example. So just for a bit of context, we took a monthly class, which is a class that takes part over 30 days. And before signing up, I warned my girlfriend. I told her, okay, for the next 30 days, every day after work, I'm going to be working on stuff. I'm going to have a lot of work. I'm going to be less available this month. But it's important for me, and I hope it's okay with you. And we discussed about it. It's also important to talk about these things. But like, warning her was what allowed me to free the time to actually, do like the assignments and actually make progress and take time to watch the lessons, practice, and write songs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good example of the big project versus the small routine, the skill development, because the 30-day thing, it did kind of involve some routine, but not a sustainable one, to
Yeah,
work that hard as we did for
definitely.
30 days. You can't do that all the time
Unless
unless
you're
it's your
Rahul.
job. But right, exactly. Oh, that dude. Um, but so we worked really hard for that 30 days. That was the project where we carved out time for it and stuff. And then the group that we met, the calls that we developed afterwards, that was the part where we turned it into a routine and kept it productive.
Now, if we wanted to take a little bit more of an extreme example, you can go as far as using days off for your hobbies, right? Even just one day off and extending, a weekend, like a 2-day weekend to a 3-day weekend, can completely change your productivity, right? Because, like, let's say your routine, your weekly routine is having fun on Saturday and doing your chores on Sunday, right? Just by adding another day, you're actually doubling the time you have for fun activities, right? Because like the chores will take one day out of those three, and now you have 2 days for the fun stuff instead of one. So just that one day of extra time off work can have a big change. And yeah, I'm not saying just burn all your days off just for making music and don't stop going on holidays with your family. But doing that maybe once or twice a year can be a big change.
Yeah, and now with everything that's been going on in the world and people more able to work remote, I think a lot of people are sort of reforging their new schedules. So if that's something, if it's important to you to be productive in a hobby, then yeah, pretend like your schedule didn't really change that much, but instead of going to work one day, you work on your fun stuff that day, you know?
Exactly. And the good thing about this is, for example, imagine I take Friday off. I just leave my alarm as if I were going to work, which means I'm in the same mood, right? For me, it's a Friday, so I'm supposed to be productive. I'm supposed to be up to start working at 9. So like instead of working on my day job, I actually can work on my music, and it's also a good way to realize that if you were treating your hobby as a real job, like if you really had like 8 9 hours to dedicate per day to your hobby, like you could make a lot of progress.
And again, we should reiterate that you don't want to burn yourself out on that. Like, don't take all of these tips that we're recommending and do all of them tomorrow because you'll never stick with it. Yeah, make sure that you're pacing yourself. That's the way to do it really sustainably. I know I have a problem in the past with getting really into something and burning myself out, never wanting to do it again. So it's important that if you're trying to develop a habit, if you're trying to be productive long term, you really need to pace yourself and do some of these things, whichever ones work for you and whichever ones you can stick with.
Yeah, and if you're already feeling overwhelmed, you don't have enough time to dedicate to your hobbies, maybe it's wise to actually spend the time you're making just to rest a little bit until you get your energy back, and then like spend that time on cooler stuff, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we mentioned at the start of the podcast that this was not just about, managing your time, but it was mostly about how to get things done and how to actually get to do the things you like, right? So I think motivation is another big, dimension to the question.
Yeah, motivation is such a huge part of it. And a lot of these bits of advice are not only to like Paul said, it's not only to get you to make time, but also get you to a space where you feel like you can actually do it, and that's part of the whole idea of restructuring your schedule, and especially the first part, the auditing, is to help you realize that if you want to make this a priority, you probably can, and so feeling no, having that knowledge and then also feeling motivated when it comes time to actually do it is going to be a huge portion of everything, and the part that I have struggled with the absolute most. So hopefully we can be a little bit helpful with that too.
Yeah, oftentimes I think feeling like you don't have time is often just about not having energy, right? If you're really tired, you can just forget that you spent time just zoning out, like being like being a zombie on your couch, not doing anything. But like that time was there. It's just that you didn't realize that it was there because you were so tired that you couldn't make anything out of it. 30 minutes with energy and 30 minutes out of energy are completely different. So it's also very important to factor energy and motivation, right? Um, so if you want to maximize your chances of getting everything done, then you need to also take care of your energy, both physical and mental energy as well. Super important, and try to not spend those on low value activities.
Yeah. So again, low value activities are fine if that's what you'd like to spend your time doing. Go nuts. And if that's how you recharge, then by all means do that sort of thing. But if you're finding that to be a problem, if you're finding it to take your motivation instead of giving you more of it, then yeah, that's a problem, and that's where you need to make an adjustment.
Now, I think within motivation, there's another question, right? Like, what if you're struggling to commit to this, right? What if you know what you should do, but you don't really have the motivation to actually do it, right? This is a big one.
Yeah, I've definitely been there before. There were probably, and I know that most people are not going to care about this, but I and my wife and our family is vegetarian. Um, and I didn't go vegetarian until probably my late 20s, even though I decided probably when I was like 20 years old, I was like, I should really be vegetarian. but I just didn't have the motivation to do it, until I finally, it struck, and then I was able to do it and stick with it. And now, we've all been vegetarian for coming up on a decade. Um, so finding the motivation to do a thing, even when you know that you should do it and you just can't get around to it, that's what you've got to really work on. And hopefully we can help with a little bit, because I know I have some history with it.
Yeah, and I think we already started giving some answers to address this problem. Talking about your projects or your dream to other people to feel a little bit more accountable and just to commit to doing things. That's one. Joining groups of people. That's another one we mentioned. Super, super helpful for motivation. Like it got us to do a lot of things in just a few months, more than the previous year for me, honestly. It was really awesome. We also talked about, committing to a schedule, that this is also something that can help. A schedule like either alone or with other people as well, uh, just to commit a little bit more. And what do you have any other tips that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of like my area of expertise. I feel like is not having motivation to do things. Um, and so I'll share some personal information that again people are probably may not be interested in. But so motivation is something I have struggled with for basically my entire life. From like the moment I got homework regularly in school, it was like motivation was just not there to do the things that I needed to do. And for me, it was a lot about mental health. So if you can get your mental health sorted, that's going to help you to be more productive more than any other thing you could possibly do. Right. So that's not to say that like we're not a mental health podcast. I'm not telling you like you have to go get therapy if you ever want to make music or anything like that. But getting that sort of thing sorted out, like for me, I when I accomplished something, it didn't feel rewarding to me, right? So if I were ever going to be motivated to do something, I had to provide some sort of really tangible external reward in order for it to ever work, for me to ever get anywhere with it, you know? And so you can use some of that, whether you're a chronically unmotivated person like I am slash was, or not, you can use ways to reinforce yourself. Reinforcing behavior is so, so important. And that's coming from my psychologist wife. But reinforcement is just such a powerful tool, even if you're just reinforcing yourself and not getting it from externally. Yeah, motivating yourself is such an important thing to do and something not to overlook. So make sure that you, like we've mentioned, have that energy, take care of your mental health, give yourself rewards, like give yourself permission to do what it is that you need to do, find people to support you. All of these things are crucial, crucial to keeping yourself motivated.
And I think one of the ways to feel actually more motivated is to track your progress. Like we touched a little bit on that on the first episode, but like one of my issues is that I learn a new skill, I make progress, but I don't realize it. I don't realize that I've actually done something useful or productive or valuable. So actually tracking your progress and feeling good about that is a big source of motivation, right? I mean, it's easy. For example, let's take the podcast. It's super easy because you can track. You have a lot of metrics. So you're like, okay, you did better. There's more likes, more views, etc. But what about learning guitar? If you're not, um, if you don't have any metrics to measure your progress, then you might not realize that you're making progress. So, like, what I would do, for example, is just film myself on my first day to remember how much I sucked. Like, this is so important. This is such a big motivator. Remember how much you sucked before, and and then you're going to realize that you made a lot more progress than you thought in a little and in a lot less time than you thought as well.
And this is one of the reasons that I decided to, even though I haven't been doing it for that long, even though I know it's very rough, I decided to put my first song on Spotify, because otherwise it's not going to stick in my mind. It's not going to mean something to me. But when I go back to that song a year from now and am really embarrassed by it, it's going to remind me like, oh man, I've done a lot in a year. You know what I mean? It's been really great. I got kind of as far as I could with just like having my songs on my hard drive on my computer and going back and revisiting them every once in a while. Like that's great, but that's not really going to be a good reminder like putting it out there will. And again, that goes back to accountability, right? And even though I'm not necessarily hearing back from the people who are going to listen to my song, it's still, I'll know that it's out there. I'll know what it sounds like, and I'll know when I can put something better out there.
Yeah, there's always going to be people with more experience than you, but there's always going to be a lot more people who have less experience than you. And if you got to the stage where you actually have the option to upload something on Spotify, then you're much further along than most people.
Yeah, by the way, check out C Theory. It's on Spotify. It's on the Apple Store. It's on the Google Store. Whatever. It's everywhere. So just check it out.
So yeah, that was a lot of positive reinforcement. Now, like if that doesn't work for you, you may try to go the other way around. I know, like I don't do that a lot, but I've read a lot of things where I have a lot of friends who do fun stuff like this. Whenever they want to get motivated about doing something, they make a bet with someone else. So they tell someone else and then they say, I'm going to have released a song within 2 weeks. And if I don't, I'm going to give you $50. And that usually works very well.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to do. That sounds awesome, and I will never do it because I'm too scared. But it would be such a good thing to commit to. That's a really good tool.
I mean, I think this is also another example of things that are not very sustainable to do. Like, don't do that like repetitively. Like, don't just do it once. Maybe just to get started, and then surf on that momentum. If it can just push you to get going, then I think it's a good thing to do, and it's still rather healthy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, speaking of getting started, I think another important thing to mention regarding motivation is that at first it's going to be harder than it ever will be in the future. I think I've heard for working out, like if you want to do it regularly, you got to give it 5 weeks. Like 5 weeks is that time for a lot of people when if you can push through how much you hate it and how annoying it is, after those 5 weeks, you'll feel good about it. And that has been my experience with a lot of things before. Like I mentioned, my wife and I used to run, and that was miserable for a while. And then by the time we stopped doing it after a couple of years, we just stopped for whatever reason. But by the end there, it was something that I craved. And if I didn't do it a few times a week, I was feeling bad about it. Something bad would happen in my life, and I'd be like, you know what? I'm going for a run. I'm just going for a run. I'm going to run it out. And that's great. Just, I'm gonna music it out. I'm gonna bang something out on this keyboard here. And that's a great way to do it if you can push through the beginning. Speaking of pushing through the first 5 weeks, push through the first few episodes of our podcast.
Yeah, and I think this is a good place to stop this one. Hopefully, with all the different tips that we mentioned, you found something that can help you in your situation, whatever you're aiming to do now. And yeah, we shared a lot of tips that we actually learned ourselves while doing this podcast. This is already episode number 3, and I feel like, Chad is more experienced than I am in podcasting, but I feel like I'm learning a lot at every single episode, both in terms of music production, thanks to our amazing hosts like Rahul last week, with the project itself. And yeah, this has been a great adventure so far, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who just checked out our podcast, our videos on YouTube, left comments and everything. We just really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've tried to give some really concrete tips, things that you can really take and get going on, tomorrow, if that's what you want to do, or later today. Maybe you watch podcasts in the morning. I don't know your schedule. But if you think of anything else, if you think of more tips or any feedback or anything like that, feel free to leave us a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Send us an email at jmspodcast@inspiredsongwriter.com. I'd spell it out, but I don't want to. So just let us know anything that you have to say, and hopefully you got something really useful, and we're getting stuff really useful out of it. So yeah, let us know.
And one cool feature that I just learned about is that you can leave audio comments on Spotify. So if you do that, we can actually feature your comments and your questions in the episodes. So if you have any question or suggestion for a topic, feel free to let us know. All right, so until next time, take care.
Met you in summer.